Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this event titled The Talk, Your Colleagues Speak. We are honored to present this program in partnership with the UC Davis Health African American Faculty and Staff Association as part of 2023's Principles of Community Week at UC Davis. My name is Megan Macklin, and I serve as Associate Director of Campus Climate and Inclusion Initiatives in the Office of Campus Community Relations, which is one of the units in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at UC Davis. Thank you for joining. To begin, a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording the presentation portion of this event only. When we have the opportunity to transition to conversation with our participants, we'll stop the recording. We did discuss this as a group before officially starting the event. We thought that it would be important to have an opportunity to memorialize some of the material and conversation presented today, both as a resource for folks who might want to share with others and for others who may not have been able to join us today. Throughout today's event, please feel free to pose any questions, share thoughts, reactions in Zoom chat. And we also, as I mentioned before, are going to have opportunity for conversation with you all facilitated by our speakers throughout the course of the event. While we meet today in a virtual space, we'd like to begin by reading the following statement that acknowledges the land where UC Davis sits. We should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Catchell-Dehe Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzal-Dehe Wintun Nation, and Yocha-Dehe Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many generations. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. The UC Davis Campus Community Book Project promotes dialogue and builds community by encouraging diverse members of the campus and surrounding communities to read the same book and attend related events. The Book Project, a signature initiative out of the Office of Campus Community Relations since 2002, advances the mission to improve both the campus climate and community relations, to foster diversity, and to promote equity and inclusiveness. Currently, we're in our 21st year, and in 2022-2023, the Book Project has been focusing on the theme of transformative justice and police reform. And we've been reading together Zach Norris's Defund Fear: Safety Without Policing, Prisons, and Punishment. Originally titled We Keep Us Safe, Building Secure, Just, and Inclusive Communities, this book calls upon the many systems that play a role and the imperative for community safety, including the criminal legal system, healthcare, education, food and housing access, and support for caregivers, which I think is really important for today's conversation. This year's book project theme and selection have been supported by a year-long program of lectures, workshops, book discussions, film screenings, exhibits, performances, and more. For more information about the book project program, please visit our website where you can find up-to-date event information, registration links, and other resources. We also welcome your involvement, students, staff, faculty, and community members, in selecting the book project featured title and in planning our annual program. If you're interested in getting involved with the book project, please send us an email or refer to the book project website for more information. Throughout today's discussion, we will uphold our UC Davis principles of community. We recognize that we may discuss sensitive topics, we will discuss sensitive topics, and we encourage you to practice self-care and seek resources when needed. You can find links to the principles of community and to the book project's mental health resource page on your screen. And now, so that we can turn to conversation, I want to briefly introduce today's esteemed panel of speakers. Jan Murray-Garcia, who serves as Associate Health Sciences Clinical Professor in the UC Davis Betty Irene Moore School of Nursing, and also as Director of Social Justice and Immersive Learning in the UC Davis Office for Health Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. James Aboagye, who is a Clinical Research Coordinator for the UC Davis Health All of Us Research Program and serves as the Chair of the UC Davis Health African American Faculty and Staff Association. And Khalima Bolden-Thompson, Associate Health Sciences Clinical Professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences, and also serving as Assistant Director of Clinical Training in the UC Davis Early Psychosis Programs. Dr. Jan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, and it may go on to 15, and just to contextualize what some of the child development and public health issues are that we talk about, even as we're talking about our personal experiences. So I want to start off with just a few stats to set the stage. This is from the annual report of the Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board, which is a state advisory board, data from 2021 on the 3.1 million stops from 58 agencies. I just, again, setting the stage. I'm not going to talk a long time about this because this is not what we're trying to get to today. But these are all different races and ethnicities. The orange is Black race. And these are actions taken by officers once folks were stopped. So this is this disproportionate number of Black folks was searched or held at curbside, in detention, or handcuffed, or ordered to exit their vehicle. Also in this study, I just want to read this really quickly about young people. Within all racial and ethnic groups, the highest observed percentage of stops in which officers handcuff, search, or detained individuals curbside or in a patrol car was for adolescents, 10 to 14 and 15 to 17. Within intersections of perceived age and racial and ethnic identity, Black adolescents were detained curbside or in a patrol car, searched or handcuffed during a higher percentage of stops than any other combination of race and ethnicity and age groups. The RIPA data reveal that 15 to 17-year-old Black youth are searched at nearly 6 times the rate of white youth, and 15 to 17-year-old Latino, Latinx youth are searched nearly 4 times the rate of white youth. Just trying to establish that we're not imagining things. Hello? Everybody okay with that? This is an office of the Department of Justice, the U.S. Department of Justice. Its sole, one of its major initiatives is called disproportionate minority contact. And it's trying to figure out this enigma, if you will, of why Black, Brown, Native American youth are more likely to be stopped, to have any kind of contact with the police. Okay, again, just trying to say we're not as parents making this up. Some of the health impacts of racially unequal policing, I just did 2. There's 2 articles that are pretty recent here. This is from 2022, JAMA Pediatrics, which is a great journal. There's a systematic review of 16 quantitative, so where they did calculations, and 13 qualitative studies. I think I put quantitative in that sentence. So lots of people, 19,000 participants, 461 qualitative, which means they didn't fill out a survey. They were interviewed and people analyzed their interview. And what they found was there's an association between police exposure and adverse mental health and risk behaviors. And also in the qualitative, so you're just talking to young people about what they're feeling about police contact. And there was fear for their life or hopelessness, which is really heartbreaking as a parent. Police killings, this is from The Lancet. In 2018, police killings of unarmed Black Americans are responsible for more than 50 million additional days of poor mental health per year among Black Americans. It's a widely cited and advertised study. And they, the Howard School of Law, for comparison, said there are 75 million health days taken for diabetes or mental health, poor mental health days because of diabetes. This is days of poor mental health reported, not taken off from work. So it has a huge impact on folks, even if they're not involved directly with law enforcement. I want to tell you a story about my 2 young men I love dearly. This is my baby boy. Y'all are seeing different slides, right? Remember that one time, James, I was just clicking and talking?
No, yeah, we see your son.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And this is my son, Gabriel, and one of his dear friends from high school, Elijah. They grew up kind of as cousins. Their moms, Elijah's mom is a dear friend of mine. I want to tell you about Elijah's first day in high school. where he was, so they'd grown up since kindergarten. In Davis, a lot of kids grow up from kindergarten with each other. And Elijah had entered an English honors class behind a bunch of his friends, and some were behind him as well. And the teacher asked him if he was in the right class. And Elijah said, yes, English honors. And she said, show me your schedule. Not believing that he could be, and this is not an uncommon story. I just heard it somewhere else on the news. Actually, I just heard it talking to some UC Irvine medical students today as well. Not an uncommon story. And you know, Davis is 95% Democrat. Half of us have felt the burn, right, y'all? It's not a conservative or, you know, in the region of a country where you might stereotype this kind of thing would happen. This kind of thing is not unusual, and it makes me want to say the talk, as we've entitled this, is just one area in which we have to impart to our Black children these extra skills, sense of awareness, and strength to intentionally nurture in our Black children. Didn't do what I needed to do in editing that sentence. Encounters with law enforcement are just one arena we worry about in terms of their emotional and physical safety of our children. Do y'all feel me in that? So we're going to just talk about that. This is just one of many discussions that we have to have with Black children growing up in America to make sure they're safe and that they have a strong sense, positive sense of themselves. This is W.B. Du Bois, the first Black graduate at Harvard. He wrote the book, The Souls of Black Folk, in 1903. Want to just remind you that in that book, he said the problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. And here we are at the 21st century, and we're still dealing with it. Fascinating. In chapter 2, called Of Our Spiritual Strivings, this is a classic book, Dr. Du Bois writes, one ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. This is our challenge as Black parents, how to raise kids who are healthy and feel good about themselves, but who will also definitely at some point in their lives be negotiating what folks have come to call double consciousness. Like I love America, I love myself, but America doesn't love me. America suspects me. Hello? And I want to say, this isn't a talk to say, oh, the poor Black parents or, you know, Black kids are broken. Again, all the parents I know, we talk about the strength of our people. And that's the only thing that keeps us from being ripped apart in this double consciousness. And also, that's what we need to send our kids forth in. So many of us have had the experience of breaking our children's heart about racism in America, why Dr. King was killed. Slavery is a big one. We have to tell our kids years before they talk about it at school, because that's not the first place I want my kids, my Black children, to learn about it. So I just want you to know we are always negotiating as Black parents. This is from both of my kids as they went through junior high school here in Davis. Mom, it's articulation day, which means they got out at 12:30. Can I hang out with my friends downtown? And my answer would be, it depends. If I'm in town, we can hang out. But if I have to go to Sacramento, you got to come home. Because as I remember telling my boy, I trust you, but I don't trust the kids you're with to do something knuckleheaded. And the first person that they're going to look at is you as the Black man child. Just a, hey, how many stories do we have of that, where that happened? Something happens, something goes wrong, and folks point to the Black person, the Black young person. This is Kenneth and Mamie Clark, and they were child development specialists in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Their research informed Thurgood Marshall for the Brown versus the Board of Education decision that desegregated schools. I want to show you just a brief video that illustrates their scholarship, and you're going to recognize this as the doll experiments. There is a video called A Girl Like Me, and it was created many years ago by a 16-year-old, but she basically replicated these doll experiments. And I don't have to say anymore, you'll recognize them.
Barbie doll. In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated schools in the
I can't see the video if you're showing that, Dr. Jan.
conducted a doll
Thank
test
you.
with Black children. He asked them to
Right. Thank you. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So I only want to do part of it.
in the 1950s. In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated schools in the 1950s, Dr. Kenneth Clark conducted a doll test with Black children. He asked them to choose between a Black doll and a white doll. In most instances, the majority of the children preferred the white doll. I decided to reconduct this test as Dr. Clark did to see how we've progressed since then. Can you show me the doll that you like best or that you like to play with? Thank you. That one?
I like to play with this.
And can you show me the doll that is the nice doll? And why is that the nice doll?
He's white.
And can you show me the doll that looks bad? Okay. And can you and why does that look bad?
Because he's black.
Watch carefully.
And why do you think
This
that's a
one.
nice doll?
Because she's white.
And can you give me the doll that looks like you?
Heartbreaking, huh? Not all kids will have this finding, y'all. I think this teenager in her project found about 60%. In Brown versus Board, it was about 70%. And this has been replicated in other places. Are y'all looking at my slides now? Okay, great. So as I told you, that was used to argue for Brown versus the Board of Education. Thurgood Marshall used that in the Supreme Court. And Earl Warren, who had been governor of California, a very conservative man, understood the moment and went around the Supreme Court and got a unanimous decision that separate was not equal. And in his decision, he said, separate education irreparably harms the self-esteem of Black children. Now, at that time, that's what they thought they were measuring. Dr. Bolden can tell us more, but the tools have gotten so sophisticated that we know something different now. Just like double consciousness, there's this thing called self-esteem, how I feel about myself. And then there's this thing called reference group orientation, group identity, how I think others feel about my racial group. And so a lot of psychologists look at those videos like that and say that child probably feels great about herself. Black children don't have trouble with self-esteem. What they're telling you is that I know what the right answer is. Hello? Based on how we've built the United States as an unequal, a phenomenon of hierarchy of the value of people's lives, of how smart they are, like Elijah walking through that door. That teacher had learned that. Ooh, honors, Black man, those two, hello? Y'all feel me? And so our kids have to grow up often feeling great about themselves, as we like to have our kids feel as Black parents, in a world that doubts their ability. Hello? Sees even their normal behavior as criminal. Hello? Would point to them as the first if they were in a group of young people. Ask me for more examples of that. So these two things are going on in the same body, just like Dr. Du Bois said. That's what we talk about, double consciousness. And so we have to, keeping our kids safe, respecting law enforcement, and yet having them feel great about themselves in a society that doubts them, etc., is our extra developmental task that we have to impart to our children. Here's how I do it, and then I'll move on from there. And my husband is Mexican American, and we're on board with this. And thank goodness. I know there are a lot of mixed mixed race, mixed ethnicity families where one person doesn't believe that their child is going to be impacted by racism. And so this is a very hard parenting moment, because many of us know you have to break the heart of your child in order to send them out safe in these social institutions that are expecting negative things from them. Here's what I told Gabi: come home, get yourself home, humiliate yourself as much as possible. We'll deal with the rest later. If you want to know my advice, there are good and bad people of every race and ethnicity. There are good police officers of integrity. I remember when the kids were toddlers and a police officer happened to be in our cul-de-sac with the car, and I remember waving to them and making sure my kids waved so that there's some sense that the police are good. They're not inherently evil. And we have the data, and we have all these videos. Tyree Nichols not doing anything. It isn't that he ran. It isn't that he resisted. It isn't Philando Castile in Minnesota told them, I'm reaching for my wallet now. I'm reaching, did the right thing. Here's what in all these things, racial inequality in the US is real and continuing. Again, this required me to break my children's heart about how a lot of kids have the privilege to be individuals. You are going to be seen also as a member of a social group that's stigmatized and marginalized. But I taught them in many different ways that this is not a fixed phenomenon and has been improved over time. In fact, they have many people in their family whose legacy it was to dedicate themselves to how dynamic that is. And I didn't put that on them, but just know it's not fixed. And you're from two great peoples, people of Mexican descent and people of African descent, who have pushed this country closer to its ideals, closer to equality. And to get down to the nitty-gritty again, given all this, here's what I need you to do. Hands at 10 and 2, always visible. Wait to get registration out of the glove compartment until the officer gets there, because you could be interpreted as reaching for something, and that might still happen. Make sure wherever you just came from, you have a receipt for it. Do not leave a store without a receipt. Follow directions, get a badge number. I did not tell my kids to ask officers if they had their cameras on. I think that's incendiary. Come home, do whatever you need to do to get home. I'm going to stop there, and I can add in other, as you see, other stuff later, but this is how Jorge and I have dealt with the two-ness of what our kids will need to go through. Khalima?
Right here.
Let me change this. There we go. Everybody good?
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Jan, for that wonderful presentation. So I want to give some idea of my background is in psychiatry. I study racial trauma and its impact on psychosis. Is where my career has come to, and what that looks like, that secondary racial trauma of viewing police killings on social media or the news, and how that impacts us. And that puts me in a position of unique terror for my children. So one of the dualities I think we deal with, particularly as academic faculty in healthcare, is the knowledge of exactly what this is. The knowledge of exactly what this kind of stress and trauma does to the brain as our children are growing. And that makes you so almost paralyzingly afraid of how to handle it, that there are days you're just like, and you're not sure where to go and what to do. So with that said, I wanted to talk a bit about how myself and my husband handle it with our three boys, who are stratified in age quite a bit. So it's given us a lot of perspective, and some of the considerations I have as a neuropsychologist by training, particularly a child specialized neuropsychologist. And so for me and my husband, we have a 20-year-old who's in college and away from us, which is wildly terrifying, except he's in like nowhere, Utah. So super happy about that to a certain extent. So we have our 20-year-old, we have our 11, almost 12-year-old in a week. And then we have our baby, he's 3. And talking to them at these different levels, particularly our 11 and our 20-year-old, is different, of course, because of their age and their developmental level. But it's also something that my husband and I do as part of our ongoing conversation. You know, when he and I first talked about how do we handle these things, what are we going to do together, which is a necessary conversation as Black parents, as a Black parent. So Jan was talking about the conversation her and her husband had to have of, hey, these are my Black children, and this is how they're going to move through the world. How can we prepare them, even acknowledging their diverse racial and ethnic background? For us, these are my step boys, and so their mother is biracial and can be identified as white. And so due to that, there is a lot of conversation between the two different households on how to handle it. And within our household, we have very similar conversations as Jan was saying. But one of the things we really talk to our boys about is this duality, calling it out for them and talking to them about, you live in a country whose ideals are beautiful. And it is in the constant struggle for those ideals that your citizenship starts, but that is also owed to you as somebody who was not part of the ideal at the foundation of this country. I don't want to share my slides because I realize there's too many, but it's one of the slides I have on my I give talks on racial trauma and how that looks and how we treat it as mental health professionals. And one of the slides I talk about is that we were not designed as individuals in the inception of this country. We were not considered as individuals in the inception of this country. That is not hyperbole, that is a legitimate fact. Regardless of having fought for this country against the British, of having built this country, we were not citizens or even human beings in the eyes of the individuals who framed this country. That does not negate the ideals set upon, but it's a very difficult duality to sit with, to know this country wasn't built for me, even though it was built by my people. And talking to our kids about that, and then how that looks in very practical terms when they go outside in the world, is something that we kind of just constantly discuss. And so we talk about the school to prison pipeline, what it means when you get upset at school, and what it means when someone has to call me down to an office. That isn't about embarrassing me. That's not about how dare you act like that. You have emotions, things happen. That's about the fear that I won't get down there in time to save you. Sit there and shut up. You wait until I get there. That's the kind of conversation I have with my 11-year-old now, as we've had with our 20-year-old. With our 20-year-old being away in college, one of the things that we especially talk about is you're a young adult and your brain is still developing. So don't touch anything. Because A, you're too stupid to know really what it is. I love you, but come on. And B, you have a brain that has not finished forming all of the synapses it needs to. Don't add stuff into it that's going to muck up out in there. Furthermore, you are in nowhere, Utah, where there's absolutely nothing to do. Literally, they go bowling and go to Walmart. Like, that's legit what him and his friends do. But there are times where you guys drive to Salt Lake City to go to a party. And young sir, you are a young Black male who is a football player and looks like it. You may not be under the influence while you're out and about in a state that I can't easily get to you. I have no one in Utah to come bail you out or to come make sure that you are okay. And so one of the things that we did with my oldest, Jalen, and his girlfriend and a couple of his friends was watch the Netflix movie American Son. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with it. Can show a picture of like the trailer, but it's Kerry Washington and Stephen Pascal as father. And it's these two individuals who are here. I'm sorry, I'm pulling up the image now so that I can be helpful, but here we go. Just gonna show my screen for a brief second. And so this movie in particular is about a young Black boy. It's about 19 or so, 18, I'm sorry, just turned 18, I believe, whose father is white, his mother is Black, and he gets arrested in a traffic stop. And the entire movie is brilliant acting by Kerry Washington and Stephen Pascal, because it's just the two of them sitting in the police station waiting to know where their son is, why he was stopped, where he is he okay? And the duality that they hold with Kerry Washington's Black mother character saying, yes, I told you, I was always terrified of this. And his white father, who is also a police officer, saying, hey, really, it's because he has done this, or he should have done this, and not understanding Kerry Washington's very real fear, particularly because her brother was killed by police. So what we have done with our sons is as these things come up in the news, particularly if they're going to be discussed, we incorporate it into our conversation in a safe space with our boys, and we talk about how to be safe and get home. And we do that while also holding this tricky balance of, this is why we work so hard as citizens of this country. This is why you see us go and vote. This is why I go to our city council meetings, because I do not want you to continue to inhabit this world. This is how it is. This is not how it has to stay. And keeping that hope alive while also speaking to the reality of things is so difficult for them to hold, because it's hard to understand. You know, at the developmental age of 11, where my son is, he's like, so white people hate us. And I'm like, no, baby, that's, you know, not what that is. Okay, so the cops hate us. No, baby, that's not what that is. And trying to explain it. And he's like, do I look older? And he's tall for his age, and he's kind of built like his brother. So he's broad and he's somewhat muscular, and he's almost 12 and he looks 14 or so. He's lost a lot of that cute baby fat. And so for him, he's like, he's still an 11-year-old, you know, he snuggles with me. He wants cuddles and, you know, to wrestle and to jump in the pool and be silly. And for him to have to reconcile, wait a minute, you mean somebody might see me and think I'm dangerous? Why? What did I do? To have to sit with that, and then to constantly reinforce your Blackness is beautiful, who you are is beautiful. The world has different constraints to it, and it is our job to try to tear those constraints down while understanding that that is not about us. That's about the world that was built around us. But we, as human beings and as a people, are beautiful. And pushing those two messages, pushing hope while acknowledging something that can lead to hopelessness, and being hopeless sometimes yourself. You know, I'm sure that Jan and James can speak to this a bit, but you know, when Tyree Nichols happened, when Elijah McClain happened, for Elijah McClain, my son, he found out at school and he came home and was like, hey, I heard on the news, which already my like stress level is 25 now. And I'm like, crap, what's up? And, you know, he says, I heard on the news about this young man who was killed, but he wasn't doing anything. I don't understand. And then having to answer the question, could that happen to me? And the amount of emotion that floods my body at the thought of it being him, while tamping all of that down to give him love and comfort and say, you know, buddy, those things happen, but here's why we talk about these things. No, and you know, I can't tell him definitively, no, that's never going to happen to you. And that is heartbreaking as a parent, to say you're safe, but not safe. And I know a lot of parents are reconciling that with a lot of mass school shootings as well. And being able to say to your child, this is an unsafe world. And there are times where I can't guarantee your safety, is that kind of duality that I think takes such, such a heavy lift, and it takes so much mental and emotional, not just ability, but mass energy to make it through that day, that time. Thank you. Sorry. And so holding that in those moments, but also just holding it, period. You know, my son leaves me and he gets out of school and he's like, oh, there's a park and a market right by him, like right next to his school. And he's like, some of my friends and I are going to go to the stores and the market. I'm going to get an ice cream or something like that. And I'm like, what friends? You know, I have the exact same questions as Jan. What friends? And we've had a talk of, you don't get to do the same thing that your non-Black friends get to do. You cannot act up in certain ways. You can't say, but it's all in good fun, because you will be the first one detained. You will be the first one questioned. And are you 1000% sure that the friends you have with you will make sure that they stand up for you and can attest to your goodness? And that's an awful thing to place on your friends.
Mhm.
So can you actually do that though? Do you have that ability to do that? Would they be able to receive it? And if not, then no, baby, you may not go and be running about in stores with other adults. And so as thank you, as a parent, you know, and again, as a parent psychologist, I'm constantly thinking of, where is my child's cognitive development, you know, his theory of mind, his ability to hold dual and dialectical thoughts, you know, is a constant struggle of, let me form the right words while maintaining my own, you know, emotional response. And let me do that while considering where he is, what that might mean for him, what he has on for the day, for the weekend maybe, and whether or not this is going to completely crap on it. Kids are pretty resilient, but I'm not going to talk to my son who plays soccer about this difficult topic right before he goes to play soccer. So, you know, it's things like that, that you're constantly doing a mental gymnastics Olympic event every moment of every day, while also trying to have those moments of levity and lightness and care. And so one of the ways that I am able to do that, and have counseled other Black mothers to do this, is to understand that your happiness, your ability to shine and be alive and be a part of this world and an active citizen in this world is such a form of radical protest that you need do nothing else. And when you understand that, you help your children see that their existence is enough, you know, understanding that your mere existence and the way you care for your kids is enough. And you do not always have to be great. And there are times you may need to pass the buck. There are definitely times I've tapped out and been like, not today. I ain't got it. It's not in me. I'm not gonna do it. That's okay too. And being able to see that and know that my kids are gonna have multiple opportunities for me to talk about this. And there's some times where I'm like, let's give this one a pass, dude.
That's
Go ahead
good.
and kick a ball.
That's good. Mhm.
Thank you, everyone. How do you practice it? So there's a lot that I do and a lot I've had to learn to do. So my mother passed away about 2 years ago in June, and my mother and I were very, very, very close. And she passed away about a couple weeks after my grandmother, and this is after losing about 4 family members to COVID over the previous couple years. And then after my mother died, my aunt, uncle, and cousin died. So it was a tough time. Needless to say, it was a rough go of it for about a year and a half, I want to say, and I had to take leave. I was doing a lot of work on racial trauma, and it was heavy, and I was giving these talks and constantly opening this wound and constantly talking about this thing that is particularly heavy and very stressful, while having this clinical job where I sit and do trauma exposure with people in session. I had to put it down. And then I had to understand what I needed and the flexibility I needed in my job, and come to my job and say, I need to work from home. And I also need to have the flexibility to say, I gotta take 30 minutes for yoga. I gotta take this meeting walking on my treadmill. I gotta do all of these things of radical self-care to just keep my cortisol levels somewhere in a general, average number. To answer your question. And thank you so much for your condolences.
Thank you, Dr. Bolden. I know there'll probably be more questions for you.
Absolutely.
Lots more questions. James, no kids yet? Married? But what's your experience with the talk or
Yeah,
the city?
it's a great question. Yeah, immediately when I was to be a part of this, I was like, I immediately thought that I'm not a parent, but the unique experience upon reflecting. So I'm the son of two Ghanaian immigrants, meaning that both my mom and dad are from Ghana, immigrated from Ghana to America, and so you can imagine that there's a learning curve in trying to, once they had children, to think about ways that they would try or attempt to keep their Black sons safe, especially when around the time of coming or having their first son, you see Rodney King. And so I say that because the conversation that my parents had with me was kind of based off of fear, but also rooted in a way that they wanted me to come back alive. So immediately when I think about, I was looking in the chat, I think it was a comment of like, tell me like basically what exactly you tell your sons. And really Dr. John gave the script, and it's somewhat similar to different parents, but for me, mine was kind of like it was very, you're actually, I think for me, it really was like, I'm kind of acting this part, it's this thing that I learned also as being an adult in terms of code switching, where you really have to kind of have this persona in order to really survive. But let's say I got stopped by an officer, which happened a couple of times. And I'll sit there and immediately the mode is really to basically, my goal is to drive home. That's my goal. My goal is to get home. And so my hands are on the wheel. Every question that's asked to me, it's yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, ma'am. Everything that I do is being announced. I'm reaching into the glove compartment to get my wallet. I'm putting my hands on the wheel. I'm turning like up, I guess, like it, and it's really it's kind of like when you go to a driving test and they say you want to accentuate those things to basically make sure that the driving instructor knows that that basically make a left turn, and you do that whole wheel turn that you don't really even do when you're a real driver. You accentuate these things to ensure that the person who is stopping you understands all your movements. And that's what I was really taught. It's just you want to ensure that there's no question on the things that you're doing while you're being stopped. And then actually as you kind of get older, because this was for me, it didn't really even happen until maybe like going into high school. My parents waited because just like, oh, we don't have to really talk to you until you get a car. But it was more so of like me going to cars with my friends and being in those same cars and being stopped. And it's just like, you still need to know how to act and what to do, regardless if you're the person who's driving it or the person who's in the passenger seat. And so it was really a combination. I think in having immigrant parents, the experience is different because they're also learning, because they're coming from a country where this rarely happens, if any. And so I'm getting kind of like a lesson, not only from my parents, the parents of my friends, but also media and culture. So you mentioned this movie, Dr. Thompson, but I think the two things, at least within my childhood, that I saw that were very stark and kind of sit in my head till this day were two episodes from very iconic Black shows. It was Family Matters and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And there are two situations where both of their sons got stopped, and both of them ended up in a jail cell. But it was this unique kind of relationship with this idea that we have in African culture of Black exceptionalism, where like if you are associated with, like in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, his uncle is as a judge, and in Family Matters, the dad is the chief of police. And so you have these this idea that, oh, if you are adjacent to privilege, then you're untouchable. But we've seen that in plenty of times, even with this Harvard professor who was trying to get into his home, that it doesn't really matter how far you climb up the ladder. It's the situation is still the same. And so from childhood to adolescence to adult, it's something that I'm still continually really learning, and it's not even it's not really done. And I'll leave with this, but the thing that also kind of stays in my mind is this quote by James Baldwin. He was like, to be a Negro and conscious in this world is to be in a state of a continuous rage, and just knowing that's just one thing. Just out of all the other things, that's just one thing you have to kind of deal with. And yeah, so that's my experience, and that's all I can really speak of is my experience.
That's beautiful, James. Really helpful. Really, really helpful.